Chapter 7, Breaking News. After completing his first field operation as Zeus, Nick Adams sought sanctuary within the quiet luxury of his uncle's sprawling mansion. Though victorious, the mission had taken a toll, physically, mentally, and emotionally. Collapsing into the comfort of his bed, the weight of the day bore down on him, dragging his thoughts back to the moments he wished he could erase. The searing memory of his parents' deaths and his helplessness in the face of their loss. Sleep came, but it offered no peace. Haunted dreams clawed at him, visions of fire, screams, and the cold stare of Thanatos looming over him like a spectre. Then came the sound, a distant clang, 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 church bells, solemn and intrusive, echoing through the mansion halls. Nick jolted upright, heart pounding, sweat slick across his brow. For a moment, he wasn't sure if the mission had continued into his dreams, or if something worse had begun. Then, Apollo's calm voice dispersed the dread like mist in morning sun. "Good afternoon, sir." The AI's tone was gentle but unmistakably bright. "I trust your rest was somewhat restorative. The time is now 12:26 p.m. The outside temperature is 2 degrees Celsius, with heavy cloud cover." Nick blinked at the ceiling, confused. "Afternoon?" He glanced at the digital alarm clock beside his bed to confirm the time. Its cool blue glow matched Apollo's report. Still, the fog of exhaustion clung to him like cobwebs. Dragging himself to the edge of the bed, he caught sight of his reflection in the tall mirror. His face was drawn, his hair matted with sweat and oil. His eyes were sunken, bruised by grief and fatigue. He barely recognized the person staring back at him. Without a word, Nick slipped into the hallway and padded towards the bathroom, 4 doors down from his suite. The hallway was lined with recessed lighting and chrome fittings, the hum of unseen machinery, a subtle reminder of Midas's technological superiority. Inside the bathroom, he stripped and tossed his clothes into the auto-wash and dry unit. The machine emitted a gentle chime, ready to process the garments. Within 5 minutes, they'd be freshly cleaned, pressed, and warm to the touch. A small luxury in a world that had taken so much. Nick stepped into the shower, activating the water stream with a voice command. Steam rose instantly, enveloping him in a curtain of heat. For a few precious minutes, the water dulled the ache in his muscles and the pressure behind his eyes. But peace was fleeting. The moment he closed his eyes, his mind returned to that day, the day he failed. The image of his parents, David and Sarah, dying before he could save them, burned behind his eyelids like an ember that refused to die. His hands clenched into fists. "Thanatos," he growled, "before this year is over, I will have my hands around your throat. I want to be the last thing you see." The words tore from him like fire, and in his fury, he slammed a bruising fist into the tiled wall. The pain grounded him, offering no relief, but reminding him he was still alive. Looking up at the ceiling, steam swirling above him like ghostly tendrils, he spoke again. "Apollo, give me the latest headlines. London region." "Of course, sir," the AI replied without hesitation. A pause, then. "Today's top headline from EMD News reports the arrest of a German arms dealer and 3 members of the Death Clause. All were apprehended in the city centre earlier today by local authorities. They are now in custody, awaiting formal interrogation, and are expected to face terrorism charges, offences which, under revised national security protocols, carry the death penalty. In other news, Princess Emily Rose has publicly pledged to serve as a volunteer nurse at St Thomas's Hospital. She will assist victims affected by recent attacks carried out by the Black Death. In her statement, Her Royal Highness expressed her wish to be treated no differently than any other staff, saying, "This is not about privilege, it's about people. If I can help even one person feel human again, then I've done something worthwhile." Her actions have been widely praised by citizens and MPs alike. Apollo paused momentarily, then continued. Lastly, aspiring journalist Stacey Watson of EMD News secured an exclusive interview with Captain Gina Rhodes, also known as the hero of the Grand War. The piece included footage of a mysterious individual identified only as Zeus. When pressed for details, Midas Industries declined to comment. As Nick turned off the cascading water of the shower, his laboured breaths echoed against the tiled walls, fog curling across the mirror like ghosts that refused to leave. He stared at his reflection, wet hair clinging to his face, a bruise blossoming on his knuckles. The wound pulsed with each heartbeat, a visceral reminder of the rage he had yet to tame. With clenched teeth, he tore a strip of bandage from the dispenser and tightly wrapped his hand, concealing the damage beneath sterile white. Not out of vanity, but shame. He couldn't face the questions, the looks, the quiet judgment. Not today. Dressed now in clean clothes, still warm from the auto wash and dry, Nick stepped out into the corridor. Yet the chill within him did not lift. It clung stubbornly, like the feeling of something unfinished, something broken. His phone buzzed the moment he picked it up. The screen flashed with a flood of missed calls and messages. 8 calls, 24 texts, all from one person. Connor Jenkins, his best friend from Biggleswade. Nick felt a pang of guilt for not checking sooner. The message previews were frantic and heartfelt. "Nick, please tell me you're okay. I've just seen the news about your mum and dad. Please call me. I'm at your house. It's empty. Mate, are you alive?" Nick didn't hesitate. He pressed the video call icon. After a few tense seconds, the screen lit up. Connor's face appeared. His sharp blue hair messier than usual, worry etched deep into his young features. "Nick," Connor gasped. "Please, mate, say something. Let me hear your voice." Nick took a steadying breath. "Hey, Connor, don't panic. I'm all right." Relief hit Connor like a crashing wave. He let out a breath he'd clearly been holding for hours. "Oh, thank Christ," he muttered, wiping his eyes. I don't know what I thought. I saw the news this morning about David and Sarah." His voice faltered. "I'm so sorry, Nick." Nick swallowed hard, his throat dry. "Thanks. That means a lot." "Everyone in Biggleswade's gutted," Connor continued. "We've been leaving flowers outside your house. Mum's been lighting candles. She's been praying you're still alive. I'll tell her you're okay. I'll tell Dad too. They'll be so relieved." Nick nodded, humbled by the thought. Even far from home, he hadn't been forgotten. Connor's tone shifted, soft but curious. "So, where are you? I went by your house, but it was locked up." "I'm in London now, at my uncle's place," Nick replied. "Your uncle? The rich one?" Nick gave a tired smile. "Yeah, him." Connor tilted his head. Is he there with you? Number, he's out of the country. Business, as usual. So, yeah, I've got the mansion to myself. There was a pause on the other end. Connor's eyes narrowed slightly, as if something had just clicked in his head. Right, okay, I have to go now. I need to talk to my parents about something, but I'll message you tomorrow. Nick raised an eyebrow, but didn't press. All right, talk to you then. You too. Stay safe, Nick. You as well, mate. The call ended, and Nick was left once again in the quiet of the corridor. But something about Connor's last words lingered. There was a spark of intention in them, something left unsaid. Placing the phone down, Nick exhaled deeply. He was safe, federal, sheltered, surrounded by technology and luxury that others only dreamed of. But none of it filled the hole his parents had left behind. None of it could drown the feeling that he was standing on the edge of something far larger than himself. And yet, he was resolute. Suddenly, brought back to the present by the rumbling protest of his stomach, Nick realized he hadn't eaten a proper meal since the spirited New Year's celebration. He recalled the endless buffet tables laden with gourmet dishes and delicacies. But that had felt like a lifetime ago. Now, the hollow ache in his abdomen reminded him he was long overdue for sustenance. He considered preparing something himself, maybe raiding the state-of-the-art kitchen stocked with ingredients fit for a royal chef. But the thought of cooking, after the chaos of the day, the firefight in the warehouse, and the emotional weight of Gina's revelations, was more exhausting than inviting. Slipping into his favourite jacket, he called out to Apollo as he reached for the front door. Apollo, while I'm in London, is there anywhere you'd recommend for decent food? The AI responded almost instantly, its tone as composed and efficient as ever. Based on recent user reviews from TripGuide, Covent Garden is currently the highest-rated area for diverse culinary experiences. This week's market theme centres around Oriental street food, featuring traditional and fusion dishes from across East Asia. Local traffic reports indicate moderate footfall and good weather for travel. Nick arched an eyebrow with mild intrigue. Covent Garden, huh? Sounds promising. He glanced back at the quiet mansion, the halls grand, the air still, and nodded to himself. Thanks, Apollo. Keep an eye on things while I'm gone. Understood, sir, came the crisp reply. Exercise caution as you explore London. With that, Nick stepped through the towering front doors, the chill of the afternoon air greeting him like an old acquaintance. The city stretched before him, loud, living, and unpredictable. For the first time in a while, he wasn't going out to fight or infiltrate. He was just hungry. They watched each passerby with unnerving scrutiny. Without hesitation, Nick reached into his pocket and retrieved his ID card, the cold plastic pressing against his palm like a badge of borrowed authority. He swiped it against the scanner and moved briskly through the ticket barrier, descending the long escalator into the underbelly of the city, towards the Piccadilly line and his destination, Covent Garden. The descent plunged him into a chaotic tide of commuters, a claustrophobic blur of humanity. The metallic grind of approaching trains and the droning announcements repeated overhead in an eerie chorus, their mechanical cadence echoing through the tiled walls. Nick's shoulders brushed against strangers, his senses prickling as if every passing glance might recognise the ghost beneath the mask of civility. Reaching the Piccadilly line platform, he found himself swept into the pulsing rhythm of the crowd. Overhead, screens illuminated the station in a cold glow, displaying the ever-watchful broadcast of EMD News. Stuart Brown, the square-jawed anchor with greying temples, appeared alongside the composed and elegant Mary Lee, her dark hair neatly pinned back, every word she spoke delivered with clinical precision. "Good afternoon," they intoned in synchrony. "Our headline story: the successful apprehension of two high-value suspects, Heinrich Fischer, son of the late war criminal Herbert Fischer, and Abba Ideal, senior member of the Death Clause organization. Both are now in custody and undergoing active interrogation." Murmurs rippled through the platform. A middle-aged man in a business coat muttered approvingly, "About bloody time someone nailed Fisher." Another younger voice added grimly, "Hope they toss him in death ball." The name alone drew a hush from some. Death ball, the Empire's most sadistic spectacle, part execution, part entertainment, and all legally sanctioned brutality. Nick felt a cold shiver crawl down his spine. Justice in this new world had teeth, and it grinned for the cameras. Mary Lee's voice cut through the rising chatter. In related news, Captain Gina Rhodes was sighted exiting the slum district shortly after the arrests. We now go live to our correspondent, Stacey Watson. Nick's thoughts jolted at the mention of her name. Stacey Watson. Her voice still echoed in his ears, that moment when she thrust a microphone at him, her camera bot hovering like a hungry vulture. The screen shifted to a shaky close-up feed of the slum district's rusting gates, grime and graffiti smeared across the frame. Stacey stood at the threshold, wind tugging at her coat, her expression poised yet brimming with intensity. "Thank you, Mary," she began confidently. "I'm reporting live from the entrance to one of the most lawless sectors in the capital, the slum district. This area has long been a refuge for society's most violent elements, from arms dealers to mercenary death cults. Earlier today, I witnessed the emergence of Captain Gina Rhodes, a living legend and key figure in the Grand War. Accompanying her was an unidentified figure clad in polished silver armor. An imposing presence Captain Rhodes later referred to as Zeus. The image cut to a brief clip. Nick in full armor, visor, glowing faintly, flanked by Spartan soldiers. The camera's angle made him look like a phantom conjured from steel and vengeance. Attempts to gain further information about this individual were swiftly intercepted by Captain Rhodes and her team, Stacey continued, the corners of her mouth twitching with restrained irritation. The Midas Corporation, when contacted, refused to confirm any details regarding Zeus's identity or purpose. His connection to today's events remains shrouded in secrecy. This is Stacey Watson, reporting from the heart of the slum district for EMD News. As the news broadcast faded from the overhead monitors, the atmosphere on the Piccadilly line platform shifted from focused silence to hushed commotion. "Mind the gap, mind the gap," echoed mechanically from the loudspeakers, underscoring the lull with unnerving monotony. Nick slipped into the current of commuters and secured a seat in the lower section of the carriage just as the doors slid shut behind him with a pneumatic hiss. He exhaled and leaned back, the familiar rumble of the train beneath him a strange comfort. As the city blurred into darkness, the tunnel walls streaked past the window in a hypnotic rhythm. Glancing up at the LED route map, he noted Covent Garden was just 5 stops away. He reached for his phone, opened Stacky Block, and welcomed the escape. Soft colours, gentle tones, and puzzle mechanics that asked for nothing more than focus. For a brief spell, he was somewhere else. But the illusion shattered the moment 3 figures stepped onto the train. Nick's thumb froze mid-move, his eyes narrowed. It was them. The unmistakable look of the lost marked their presence like blood in water. The garish fashion, the swaggering body language, the predator's stillness behind their eyes, it all screamed trouble. They hadn't seen him yet, but he recognized them instantly. Their previous encounter had ended in violence, and Nick had walked away the victor. That alone made this moment volatile. Leading them was Scar, a brute of a man with a butcher's frame and a scalp carved by history. A spiderweb of jagged scars gleamed under the carriage lights, each one a chapter of his violent past. A long, curved knife sat nestled in a sheath at his back, partially visible like a snake ready to strike. Daps followed closely behind, thin as wire, eyes sunken and jittery beneath his old, slouched beanie. His oversized mesh hoodie hung off his frame like cobwebs. There was a jittering energy to him, like a firework waiting for a match. Last came Keisha. Her every movement was deliberate, almost elegant, yet unmistakably dangerous. Her dark skin shimmered with a faint sheen of sweat, and her dreadlocks fell past her waist like a lion's mane. Gold hoops glinted as she scanned the carriage, her lips pursed in perpetual disdain. The gang moved through the carriage with practiced menace. Passengers shrank into themselves, eyes down, shoulders tight. Scar leaned over a man with trembling hands and gave a wolfish grin, the kind that promised pain. Daps slid in beside a middle-aged passenger, resting a hand on his knee with mock familiarity. Then he leaned close, a blade suddenly materializing in his grip. "Greetings, sir," he hissed, twirling the knife between his fingers. "My buddy here needs cash. His mate's arm got busted. Real tragic, innit? So you know what we're after." The passenger, a greying man in a pressed suit, visibly swallowed but didn't flinch. "I'm sorry," he said, voice level, though his knuckles whitened around the strap of his bag. "I refuse to fund criminals." Daps leaned back slightly, grinning. "Ooh, brave one, aren't you?" Keisha, who had been watching with interest, suddenly drew a crude, cobbled-together firearm from beneath her coat and pointed it directly at the man's chest. Her expression didn't change. Scar barked a laugh. "Step aside, Daps. Let's show him what bravery earns." Daps moved, folding himself onto the opposite seat like a feral crow. Scar loomed over the man, reached out, and closed his massive hand around the commuter's throat. He lifted him like dead weight, pinning him against the metal wall. "Please, don't hurt me," the man choked, flailing. I'll pay anything." Scar's face split into a grin, thick with cruelty. "It's too late for that." With a grunt, he drove a fist into the man's jaw. A spray of blood burst from the man's mouth and spattered across the window behind him. Passengers gasped, but no one moved. No one intervened. Amid the harrowing scene unfolding before him, righteous fury surged through Nick like a lightning strike. Watching Scar brutalize a helpless civilian filled him with guilt. It was his fault. The Lost were clearly extorting passengers to pay for the damage he'd inflicted on Jax's arm during their earlier encounter as Zeus. Now someone else was suffering because of it. A powerful urge to transform and end the standoff in seconds clawed at him. Zeus could silence this chaos, but revealing his identity here would risk everything. Gritting his teeth, Nick forced down the impulse. He had to act, but as Nick. Drawing a breath, he took a bold step forward and bellowed, "Put him down!" The words cracked through the tense air like a whip, slicing through the cries and murmurs that filled the carriage. The train jolted slightly as it hurtled forward, but the real movement came from the collective turn of heads as all eyes fell on him, including Scar's. Scar's expression darkened, his grip tightening on the man's throat. "And who the fuck are you to bark orders at me?" he sneered. His voice a low growl of disdain. Nick didn't flinch. "I won't ask again. Let him go or face the consequences." Scar's eyes narrowed. With a subtle nod, he signalled to his lieutenants. Keisha raised her firearm, levelling it at Nick with calculated precision. Her dreadlocks swayed as she tilted her head in challenge. "You really want to die for someone you don't know?" she hissed. Dap stepped forward too, a crooked grin plastered across his thin face. He twirled his nunchaku lazily, the wood clacking in rhythmic menace. "Hope your dental's covered, mate." But Nick stood his ground. No stutter, no trembling. "Empty threats and flashy weapons don't scare me," he shot back. "I've faced worse than you." He glanced around the train. Passengers sat frozen, wide-eyed, trembling, silent. He saw himself in them, every schoolyard victim, every helpless bystander he used to be. Not anymore. He raised his voice. "Are we really going to let them decide who gets beaten, who gets robbed, who gets to speak?" He turned his glare back to the gang. "You don't rule this train. Not today." A ripple stirred in the carriage. A few passengers nodded. One man even stood, then another. A murmur of support built, small but growing. Scar scowled. Bang! The gunshot exploded into the ceiling, plaster raining down like ash. Screams rang out. Passengers dropped to the floor, covering their heads in terror. Keisha smirked, pistol raised again. "Now sit the fuck down before I—" She never finished. Nick lunged, moving with speed born from instinct and training. He grabbed her wrist, twisted sharply. The gun flew from her hand. She gasped in pain, then gasped louder as Nick drove his shoulder into her sternum, flipping her backwards over his hip. She hit the floor with a crash, and Nick didn't hesitate. One sharp punch to the jaw, and Keisha was out cold. The train fell into stunned silence. Even Daps froze, his weapon dangling from nerveless fingers. Scar's eyes went wide with disbelief. Nick stood tall, chest heaving, fists clenched, heart racing. Keisha lay motionless at his feet. He turned slowly, facing the shocked crowd. "Enough," he said. "No more fear." The statement was simple, but the weight behind it was undeniable. It wasn't just bravado, it was a line drawn in steel. Every inch of Nick's posture radiated defiance, forged through years of schoolyard fights. Countless sparring sessions with Aunt Susan. And the weight of every injustice he had ever seen or suffered. He wasn't Zeus right now. He didn't need to be. In the thickening fog of tension, Daps erupted, fueled by a volatile mix of rage and humiliation at seeing Keisha floored so decisively. The wiry teenager let out a feral snarl. His eyes burned with hatred as he brandished his nunchaku with white-knuckled fury. "You're a dead man, you insolent cunt. I'll make you fucking regret this, he roared, charging with reckless abandon. Nick moved on instinct. Snatching Keisha's discarded pistol from the floor, he gripped it by the barrel and hurled it with pinpoint precision. The heavy metal struck Daps square in the face with a sickening crack, sending him stumbling backwards with a howl of agony. Off balance and dazed, he collided hard with one of the metal poles lining the carriage. The impact was brutal. He crumpled to the ground, unmoving, moaning faintly as he drifted into unconsciousness. Nick didn't even pause to catch his breath. Straightening, he turned his attention to the last threat standing, Scar. The gang leader had just released his grip on the civilian, letting the bloodied man collapse in a heap. Nick's cool gaze met Scar's, and he allowed himself a small, cocky smirk. Looks like your crew weren't as tough as you thought, Nick said, voice calm, tinged with challenge. Your turn. Surrender now, or do you fancy joining them? Scar's knuckles whitened as his fists clenched. The muscles in his jaw tensed. His pride, battered and bleeding, bristled at the taunt, and in his eyes a storm brewed. You're dead meat, he hissed, voice low and venomous. I'll take my time with you. You'll be begging for death by the end. The air between them crackled. Passengers cowered, others watched, transfixed. Nick didn't flinch. Come on then, he said simply. Scar charged like a freight train. He threw a vicious right hook, all raw muscle and fury, but Nick, sharp and focused, dropped low beneath it, the punch sailing harmlessly overhead. In a blur of movement, Nick spun and drove his foot into Scar's knee with surgical precision. A wet crack, a howl of anguish. Scar collapsed, clutching his leg, writhing in agony on the filthy train floor. His aura of menace shattered in an instant, replaced by pitiful groans and the dull thud of his fists pounding the ground in rage and pain. Nick stood slowly, chest rising and falling with effort, his jacket damp with sweat. Applause broke out like a wave as stunned passengers erupted in cheers. He pushed back damp strands of hair from his brow and flicked his jacket collar up, casting a final look at the ruined tyrant at his feet. Had your fill of trouble? He asked dryly. The crowd roared louder. Scar, wheezing and sweat-soaked, tried to sit up, his face contorted in pain and disbelief. His voice barely more than a rasp. How did you do that? Nick stepped closer, crouched just enough to meet his eyes. He gave a half smile, not cruel, just cool. Maybe you were banned from martial arts back in school, he replied. I wasn't. He rose and turned away, leaving Scar groaning behind him as the crowd parted like the sea, their faces glowing with awe and newfound hope. Amid the lingering silence that followed the confrontation, a tall, distinguished figure stepped forward from among the relieved passengers. Clad in a tailored navy suit and a calm, dignified air, the man's gaze fixed on Nick with quiet admiration. He approached with deliberate steps, extending a hand. I'm Dr. Roger Stone, he said warmly, his voice tinged with awe. Young man, I owe you my life, as do many here. Thank you for your bravery. Nick, modest, despite the adrenaline still coursing through him, shook the doctor's hand firmly. I only did what anyone should have done, he replied with quiet resolve. No one deserves to be terrorized like that. Stone's expression softened further. You've done more than most ever could. If there's anything I can do to repay you... But Nick shook his head. I didn't do it for repayment, he said. I did it because it was the right thing to do. A moment passed before the train was filled with applause. Not polite clapping, but a genuine, thunderous ovation that echoed down the carriage. Passengers rose from their seats, many with teary eyes, others filming the young hero on their phones. Nick, slightly flushed, dipped his head in appreciation, but kept his expression humble. Just then, the train's speaker crackled to life. Next stop, Covent Garden, the conductor announced. Nick turned back to Dr. Stone, giving his hand one last shake. Take care of yourself, Doctor. And you, son, Stone replied, pride etched in every word. But as the train began to slow, its gentle hum was suddenly disrupted by shouting and the thunder of heavy boots. A team of Xerxes soldiers stormed onto the carriage, rifles raised and visors gleaming. Nobody move, one of them barked. We've received reports of a disturbance. Members of the lost gang are on board. Passengers stiffened in panic. The tension crackled in the air like static. But Nick didn't flinch. He stepped calmly into the centre of the carriage, nodding towards the unconscious gang members splayed out across the floor. You're a bit late, he said evenly. Your problem's already been handled. The lead soldier, an angular man with a buzz cut and the stripes of a field commander, glared at Nick with barely concealed contempt. You had no authority to act, he snapped. This was a military matter. Interference is punishable. Before Nick could reply, Dr. Stone stepped forward again, placing a steadying hand on Nick's shoulder. With respect, Commander, he said firmly, this young man saved us all. If he hadn't stepped in, your squad would be cleaning up corpses, not cuffing criminals. A murmur of agreement rippled through the passengers. One woman called out, He protected us when no one else did. Another added, That gang had weapons. He stood up to them alone. The commander's face twitched. Faced with a united front, he ground his teeth and relented. Fine, he muttered. Everyone off the train. We'll take it from here. As the passengers filed out, murmuring praise and stealing glances at Nick, he lingered near the exit, letting the crowd thin. The last to leave, he glanced over his shoulder at the battered gang members, now being restrained by Xerxes' soldiers. Scar, still crumpled and furious, locked eyes with him. His voice was low and threatening. Hey, kid, you've got balls. I'll give you that. If you'd been one of us, I might have respected you. But now, you've made an enemy. You and anyone you care about. Watch your back. Nick raised an eyebrow, unbothered. Enjoy prison, he replied, turning his back without hesitation. Food's crap, but I hear the yoga's decent. The crowd chuckled as he walked away. As he stepped off the platform and back into the bustle of Covent Garden, the thrill of victory began to fade. And a deep, gnawing ache reminded him of one simple truth. He was starving.